Welcome to Verbalhub. So the cat is out of the bag. All we know that the cat exam took place on the 24th of November, and all the three slots, uh, you know, we have gone through. So let's analyze what cat exam brought this time. Particularly, we are discussing the slot one, right? So one of the major changes in cat 24 that we observed as far as the pattern was concerned in the DLR slot, right? The VRC did continue to have the 24 questions, but the DLR, which for the previous 2 or 3 years has been having four sets with 5 questions each, hence 20 questions. This time there was a bit of a change. There were a little bit more options. There were a total of 22 questions. When you read the instructions, initially, it mentions that there are 22 questions in DLR in total, having either 4 or 5 questions each. So anybody can do the little bit maths and understand that it means that there need to be 3 sets over here, which will be having 4 questions each, and there will be 2 sets having 5 questions each. So therefore, that brought to a total of 22 questions, right? 3 into 4, 12 questions here, and another 10 questions here, right? So we had a little bit of a more options in terms of attempting the sets. While having only 4 sets earlier, now we have 5 sets. And the quant, as usual, has brought in its usual 22 questions, right? Apart from that, the usual scheme was there, +3 and -1 for MCQs. No negative marking for the theta questions. Type in the answer type, right? And all the type in answers had the whole number answer choices. So let's discuss one by one. As far as VRC was concerned, right? As usual, there were the 4 passages and the other questions. The other questions were para summary, right? And sentence insertion, para summary, summarize the passage, sentence insertion, and odd sentence, right? So, how much should you attempt, and what's the ideal um, number of attempts, and what's the expected score against percentile? Well, everything is subjective, right? We cannot define anything in black and white, but at least 2 RC passages must have been attempted. Ideally, 2.5, I would say. Let's say 2.5, or if you are good in your efficiency, 2.5 or 3 passages could have been attempted, right? One of the passages, was clearly difficult to read. I would say one passage was difficult, right? As soon as you read its first line, it was difficult, right? If you had that first lot, then you will clearly identify that. um, I think that was something to do with art, or something of that sort. There were a few passages. There was one particular passage which was quite easy, that was on technology. Right. um, and all the questions were as usual about inference, you know. Which of the following can not be inferred based on the statements made by the author, right? Which of the following best supports um, which of the following which amongst the following best supports the argument made by the author, or which of the following, if true, uh, uh, best contradicts the arguments made by the author. So those kind of inference based questions were plenty to be found, right? And so that means that you can get roughly what, around 10 to 12 questions you can attempt in the RC, right? with a good accuracy, that's a good attempt. Amongst the remaining questions, all in all, you know, with sentence insertion being theta questions, you know, you can clearly go for them, right, with no negative marking. Overall, these three combined together, you could have attempted, I would say, another question number of questions in the range of, let's say, at least four or five questions, right? 4 to 5 questions you can easily attempt in this in this segment combined. So ideally, you know, all in all, you should have attempted somewhere in the range of, if you have a good accuracy, although it is 10 plus 4, I would say at the least 12 and go up to, let's say, 16 number of questions. These many questions, if you had attempted, I would say, right? And your accuracy is good. So you're clearly in the good zone, right? Particularly, I myself attempted 18 questions, if I recall. Well, I always attempt, you know, high number of questions because I'm never sure of my accuracy, right? Um, so I deliberately left out one passage, which was difficult. I attempted three passages, and I do remember attempting a total of 18 questions. So I guess it could have been any kind of split between these two, maybe 12 and 6 or something like that. I have attempted, right? So um, out of 18, if I've attempted, I'm guessing at the very minimum, three or four are definitely going to be wrong because always you have these, you know, close options. Nonetheless, 12 to 13, even if you have attempted 12 to 14 questions, it is not a bad attempt, right? It's a good attempt. So all in all, I would say, overall, the entire section was in line with the recent year patterns, right? There was nothing too much that was, you can say, unexpected in verbal, right? The usual RC passages and the usual VA section as well, right? With its different variety of difficulty. But the good mix was there, right? Anybody would feel happy attempting this section, right? And get a good start. So, although it is a bit difficult to pinpoint any specific ideal score versus percentile, but all in all, roughly, if I talk of the raw score, then 8 to 9 net correct questions would definitely land you into the 98 to 99 percentile range. Approximately, you should be able to reach there. 8 to 9 net correct. Now, this can go here and there. So I would pin my hopes to be somewhere like, 8 to 9 net correct would mean what? 24 to 27, right? So that should be your score reaching to the near to the 99 percentile score. It might be 9.5, it might be 8. So I can guess somewhere in that range. So even if I assume that people have attempted, in a good way, such that people have scored highly, let's say on the upper side, I can say somewhere around 28 to 30 score, right? Let's be on the safe side. I'm guessing should land you in this percentile, this being the raw score, right? What might be the scaled version of the scores, whether this was a easy section or whether across the three slots, whether this was the easier or the difficult, that remains to be seen. I would say this was not on a difficult side. Verbal was not on a difficult side. It was on the medium scale. It was doable section. Okay, right? Definitely, there were some difficult phrases to be understood, right? For example, some sets, some of the RC passages did have some questions like, what does this sentence, in this particular sentence, what is the author trying to emphasize? And there are certain, um, those phrases which whose meaning you had to decode. Uh, that was uh, that was, I would say, one of the trickier parts of the RC passages, right? Otherwise, if you're habitual of your inferencing from the sets passages, should not have had an option. You should not have had much difficulty. And even in those phrase based questions, if you read the entire passage in one go, you would mostly be able to understand what that means. I personally have this habit of picking an entire passage and just going through it in one go instead of doing some breaks in terms of my reading. I It is always good to read the whole passage entirely and then go for the questions. It's my personal choice. Some people first read the questions and then come to the passage. I rather think that instead of um, influencing my mind by reading the questions, I first understand the theme of the passage, you know give a full reading in 7 to 8 minutes, and then go for the questions. If you have done that strategy and if you have attempted these number of questions roughly, then you're in the good side. So that's your VRC section of slot one, right? I would say on the medium side. Next comes our DLR section. So in the DLR section, as we have just mentioned, that there were these 5 sets, right? So good. I mean, I always felt that in the last 2 3 years, when CAD has given us 4 sets, it was leaving us with very few choices, to select from. Ultimately, 4 is a very small number. If you have to, when there were 4 sets, we used to tell students an ideal number of attempts is 2.5 sets, right? So you rarely are having much choice. Just one set out of the 4 you can reject. The other 3 you have to attempt ideally. Now, what was the difficulty level? What sets came, and how many attempts you should have done? So out of the 5 sets, I would say clearly 2 were easy, 2 were medium, and 1 was difficult. The difficult one I was not able to read because it was clearly an outlier question, in the sense that it was such a long set. If you were in the slot one and if you have skimmed through all the 5 sets, I hope you did so, you must have come across that one particular set in which the entire information was capturing the entire screen with a lot of bullet point in information. And there, I think it was in 2 stages also. I mean, there was so much information. Now, let's come to what were the easy and medium sets. First of all, broadly, what should have been your number of attempts out of the 5 sets? I would say a good attempt would have been 3 sets. So 3 or 3.5 sets would have been a good attempt. Now, if you attempted less than that, then also don't worry. If you have attempted 2.5 sets also, that is also a good number of attempts, right? So means, what is 2.5 sets? Maybe that means 2 fully and 1 partially. So that would mean how many? Let's say roughly around, I would say 10 to 12 questions. 10 to 12 questions with a very good accuracy, means when you're very much sure of, yes, I got the correct answers, right? I personally was able to attempt 3.5 sets. So if I recall correctly, I was personally able to attempt 16 questions out of the 22, right? Um, and that happened because I had a good start, to be honest. When I read the first set, okay. So the first set that I read was one of the medium questions. Let me discuss all the 4 sets which were easy in medium. So there was this one set which was directly on graphs. It was directly calculation based. It was the easiest of all the sets. There was that graph with having 10 no, not 10, but there was 7 this thing this thing what you just stocks, 7 stocks, right? And their trading information was given, right? So uh, trading information was given, and day start, right? There was this kind of a bar, there was this kind of box plot, I would say, right? It was a box plot. If you understand what's a box plot, it has these four values uh, in in each box plot. It was like this. There was this rectangular box, and then there were these two vertical lines. So there was the day start, there was the day end. At what point it started was given here. I mean, amongst these two, one was the day start, one was the day end. If the day start was higher than the day end, then it was a bearish stock. If the day end was higher and the day start was lower, then that was called as a bullish stock, right? And these 2 points, they were the intraday highest and the intraday lowest points, highest and lowest values of the stock within the day, right? These were the points over here. And then there were direct calculation based questions, and there were some indices, etc., mentioned along in the questions, and we had to calculate which index was highest, which index was lowest amongst the stocks. So there were straightforward calculation based direct easy questions, right? And I was using the calculator a lot to do those calculations, some of them being tedious calculations to compute. So I did make use a lot of use this time with the calculator, although I like doing hand calculations. But this time, you know, I made use of the on-screen calculator. Yes, so this was one easy set. Now another easy set, right? And that was a quant-based reasoning kind of question. Now, what was that all about? Um, that set was about, I think there were if I'm not wrong, there were these six or seven, I guess, bloggers, or right, I guess, no, there were four bloggers, I guess, and they were being rated by uh, certain individuals. Their ratings were given to them by, I think, six individuals, right? And something was some then the ratings were in multiples of five, and the total. So there was these mathematical conditions, right? That each of these persons gave a total points of, I guess it was maybe 45 or something like that, maybe 50. I guess 50 it was, points to each of the, I mean, the total points given by each of these six people was 50 across the four bloggers. And similarly, then the information was that each blogger got the same total number of points. And there were some further bullet points and mathematical conditions to be able to fill the grid, of each blogger got how many points from each of the persons. So it was a grid based mathematical puzzle, right? Where you have to fill in the numbers. So this was quite, I would say, on the easier side, because them being multiples of five, multiple of, I guess this was number first, I guess 45, if not, I'm wrong, not 50. Anyways, so it was easier set, means once you know, so there was this graph also given alongside, uh, you know, apart, there were bullet points as well as a graph given, both of them were there. In bullet points some information was given, and another graph gave directly that how many points were given to the bloggers A and B amongst A, B, and C and D. That was given directly through graph. So you get to fill those numbers directly from the graph for A and B, and then for C and D you have to figure out. So these two were the easy sets. Okay, now let's come to the medium sets, right? So uh now, coming to the two medium sets, right? So one was clearly something. Okay, so I started with this medium set, okay, and it took me a while to be able to understand how to formulate this problem, in the sense that how do I represent this information. This is very interesting, I would say, one of the beautiful cat questions, which is doable but requires thinking, right? For 2 3 minutes it took me the time to understand how do I represent this information. Now that said, was a Venn diagram question, right? Now, Venn diagram questions, never come by actually giving you, okay, this is the Venn diagram. You have to decipher, you have to decode that, yes, this question is about Venn diagram, because that happens when you have data which is of overlapping nature, right? So now what was here? There were, I guess, three people. I remember there were three people. They were named also, and they visited certain countries. Those countries were segregated in three ways. I guess one was Asia, one was, I think, Europe, and one was the rest of the world. ROW was written. And now, what was the information? So the information was given such that in total, these people visited a total number of countries visited was given. I think that was 32, if I'm not wrong. And then there were these bullet points informations, right? In fact, there was a graph. There was a graph. I remember there was a graph clearly, and that graph mentioned each. I mean, that graph was like this: that for each of the persons, let's say person names were ABC. I don't remember the names, but there were these three persons ABC. Okay, so for each of them, Asia, Europe, rest of the world, how many countries they visited. So this way, the bar graph, the information was given. Some of them were also zero, I guess. So, with different shadings, and it was mentioned, right? Like something like that. And let's say like that. And some shading was there. And, that this is your Asia, this is your Europe, and like that. So you were directly given the data basically of each person visited how many countries from each of the three uh, segments of the countries, right? Now, then after that, there were bullet points, says that um, only one condition was something like this: only one. So let's say uh, in A and B visited one country in Asia, uh, only in Asia, something like that, right? Let me say once again: only in Asia, A and B visited one common country. So means in others regions like Europe and rest of the world, they will not visit any common country. So in this sense, how many common countries any two or three persons visited, that information was given. So there was some other points like in rest of the world, only one country was visited by all the three people. Now, therefore, what it took me 2-3 minutes to understand that I need to draw three Venn diagrams of three sets each. Means in Asia, as well as in Europe, as well in the rest of the world, I have to form the three Venn diagram, the three group Venn diagram of ABC, visiting regarding the number of countries they visited. So I have to solve these three Venn diagrams of these three countries like that. And yes, eventually I was able to fill the entire information. So this 32, how I use that was the key info, was very critical to understand that the total value of the three sets should be 32. Now I did a little bit maths. I did take a little bit of variables also, right? And eventually it did get solved. So once the paper comes out, if you try this, if you have tried this in the paper, and if you have tried in this manner, you should have been able to solve, right? And yeah, so I would say medium set, because it's a doable. It's not very difficult, it's not very easy, but you can do this once you understand the structure of the data, uh, right? And yes, so this was the first set that I personally attempted, which was doable, right? So these three sets, I would say, you should have been able, if you have attempted done the if you have chosen the correct sets, then these should have been the three sets to choose. One is this Venn diagram set, one is this graph based, and one is this, you know, okay, and the other one was the blogger one. Now coming to the other medium set, right? The second doable set, the medium set in DLR. This was on games and tournaments. And this one was my the half attempt, I attempted these three completely, fully. I was able to solve this one completely. This was my first attempt, right? And amongst these two, this was my second attempt, the graph one. Then the third one that I attempted was the grid based, this one. And then I was left with some 6 7 minutes, and then I went for the fourth attempt. Clearly I had rejected this difficult set by now already, because I had skimmed through all the sets. So I have already rejected that difficult set. And now so with the remaining time, this one was about so this was about kind of a non-standard, I would say, round robin format. Okay, not a standard one, in which he gave us that there were 6 teams. They were divided into 2 groups of 3 teams each. And what happened was, uh, each team within a group played one game amongst themselves. Each pair of teams within each group played exactly one game amongst themselves. And that is not the only thing. Each pair of teams across the two groups, each pair of teams across the two groups played two games amongst themselves. Played two games amongst themselves, right? So you can understand that it's kind of a round robin, but not a standard one, because you're have also having matches across the groups, right? So let's say the teams are and the teams were numbered from 1 to 6, right? And we had to decode that which group had which teams. So the bullet points were given, information was given, right? Each group had uh, which group had which teams, that had to be decoded. Means the formation of the two groups had to be decoded from the bullet points. And it was also given that some on each day, so the tournament spanned over a certain number of days, right? So the very first question that was asked was about that the tournament happened over how many days. Such that condition was there, uh, you know uh, over a certain number of days, such that on each day each team played exactly one match. So the first question I think was very easy. It was just about counting of the number of matches, that how many total matches will be played according to this condition. Once you understand that, this total number of matches will be played, so many matches will be played in total according to this scheme. And then that how many matches need to be played in a single day, so that each team has played exactly one match. You can clearly understand there will be 3 matches per day, so that will involve the 6 teams. And then total number of matches divided by these 3 will give you that how many days the tournament will span across. That does come out to be 8 days, because once you count this, it comes to be a total of 24 matches. And then there were obviously that you had to decode that on which day which team played which team. You had to decode that. So there were points about that, like such that on it was like this it was like this: day 4 and day 7, the same group of teams played their matches. So you can understand that on both these days, only those matches should have happened across the teams, because the same set of teams playing against each other twice can only happen across the groups, right? So there are two such pairs of days. And then there were direct information, like on this day, let's say on day 5, team 1 played with team 6. On day 8, team 6 played with team 4. And so those points were there, and then you have to figure out what was the entire spectrum of which matches were played on which respective days, right? And then there were questions like, on day 5, team 1 played with which team. So there were those questions. So yes, this I could have attempted completely if I had 5 more minutes, but I did not have that. I have attempted 3.5 sets. And now coming to therefore, so I've already told you that 2.5 sets is a good attempt. I personally was able to do 3.5 because I think I had a good day, to be very honest. You know, Uh, so 10 to 12 questions attempts is a good number of attempts with a good accuracy. Now, so this DLR section overall was again on the medium side. Okay, not on a very difficult scale, because two sets were easy, two were medium. So anybody should have been able to attempt 2.5 or 3 sets, right? Um, this graph one was a completely straightforward one, nothing complex. Just you carefully understand the graph, and the vertical scale, you read the numbers and you do the calculation. And I use the calculator a lot. This mathematical grid one was clearly doable, not a very difficult one. Just integer values, moreover in multiples of 5 had to be distributed, and a total of 45, and so it was easy, right? So these two sets should have been done, and one of the medium sets could have been done, one amongst these two, either the Venn diagram or this games and tournaments, right? So uh, the set selection, you know, was critical, not to get entangled in that difficult set, right? So overall, I would say out of the 22 questions on the net, correct of, let's say, somewhere around 8 questions, you should be in the 95 to 98 percentile, or maybe on the higher side if the paper was difficult. So I would say somewhere around 8 questions, somewhere around 25 score would land you somewhere in this range of 95 to 98 percentile, right? That's my personal take, based on the fact that this was um, quite doable set, right? Quite doable section this time, right? Overall, the paper, this time was the one in which everybody had an equal chance. Maths people, non-maths background, the reasoning section was not the one in which there was too many case analysis, too much if then, that analyze this possibility, then analyze this possibility. We have seen the previous year, the last 3 to 4 DLR sections, the way it has been coming, it has been a little bit sometimes a lot of complex case analysis is required. Sometimes the mathematical puzzles are also very, very intriguing. But this time there were good mix of sets, questions which were, once you just do a little bit of application, it should be done. Okay, so therefore that's my personal take, right? 8 to 9 net correct is landing you into 98 to 99 percentile. Coming to the quant section now, right? In the quant. Now, how would I rate the quant overall? I would say that there was a good mix of both easy as well as difficult questions. There were definitely some difficult questions. Okay. For example, I remember one particular question on, okay, so my personal attempts were out of the 22, I was able to attempt now. See, obviously I have a little bit of upper hand, you know but still I was able to attempt 19 questions. Now this might look like obviously an outlier, so just forget this. I always attempt as much as I can, right? So 19 I was able to attempt out of 22. Now forget that number. Right? Okay, so the thing is I attempted 19 because I've got three difficult questions. I was able to identify three difficult questions, so everything else I attempted completely. Now why I found them difficult, I'll tell you. Uh, so I'm emphasizing over here on the fact that there were these speed breaker questions. I call them as speed breakers. Means once you read them, you know what the question is asking. Uh, the question is not difficult to understand the requirement of the question, but actually the maths behind required behind it is either too much calculation intensive, or actually you don't get to be able to start what what mathematically needs to be done in the questions. One particular question was on quadratic equation, which was clearly difficult. That question came with three quadratic equations. There were three equations given, and they had a common negative root. And then it was asked that and the equations were given with some coefficients which were in parametric form. Equations were something like x square minus mx plus some constant was there, maybe 19 something, equal to 0. There was another x square minus nx plus some other constant, I don't remember exactly, but something equal to 0. And there was another one like x square minus m plus nx plus like again some constant, so something like that. And they had a common negative root, and you have to identify some value of m and n, something like that. So this was a difficult question. I could not start with this one, how to do this in the exam situation. I left that. There's another question on um uh this was about there was this sphere. It was a question on mensuration sphere, and there was a cuboid inscribed inside of this sphere. So there was this question, and you have to figure out the volume of the sphere based on the conditions given about the cuboid. I guess sum of lengths of the three sides was given, and the area was given of this cuboid, and from that you frame the equations. So I did frame the equations, and I did try to find the value of the radius of the sphere, but somewhere, I don't know, I was not able to match the values and get the answer. So there was one more difficult question. I could not remember that right now, but there were these couple of difficult questions. So overall, uh, uh, you know, uh, easy, medium, difficult, if I want to classify, then I would say that um, so see, um, how many are doable and how many I would say easy. If I can, on a very ballpark estimate, I would say somewhere around 7 to 8 questions, I would say we should be able to say were doable, very easy, straightforward, based on your basic, uh, the most basic knowledge with each of the topics, right? And difficult, I would say, although I put here three personally because I did not attempt three, but yes, I would say overall. Uh, Somewhere around I would say 4 to 6 questions or 4 to 5 questions I would want to put in the difficult category, because I was obviously able to attempt some difficult questions because of my personal knowledge. Overall 4 to 5 questions were difficult, so that makes for somewhere around 12 questions over here. Somewhere around 10 to 11 questions you would say is medium. That's a rough split. So there was an there was a good mix of easy to difficult questions, right? So you should have, you should not have, you should have left out these difficult ones. You should not have spent much time on them. Overall, what's a good attempts? Good number of attempts with good accuracy, I would say um, anywhere between, let's say, 11 to 13 questions attempt is a ideal number of attempts. If you have attempted slightly less than this, maybe you have attempted 9 or 10, don't worry. If you have got all of them correct, you are 100 percentiler. We know that that is, the approximate range, uh right. um these many attempts, more than this or in this range, you're good with good accuracy, right? Slightly less number of attempts is also fine. I'm keeping these number of attempts because I'm assuming some 20 to 30% uh you know mistakes being then done. Now coming to the arithmetic and the algebra and specific topics, what was the type of questions that we got? Numbers, geometry, PNC probability. I don't remember seeing um okay, right. So let's classify the topics amongst these. PNC, modern maths. Okay. So there was some particular questions which made a comeback after a lot of years. Let me come one by one. Particularly in algebra, the difficult to medium questions, were more to be obtained in algebra. I mean, I would say, uh, yes. So for example, this was a question, and there were a few more questions in algebra. For example, there was a one question on indices and surds. That one was having some powers on k and the sum of the values of k had to be obtained. So there was that question was medium, right? Um, and yes, there was one particular question on functions, and that question was about mapping, right? So this one was a surprise to me because I never, although we teach this mapping concept of functions, but a direct question came on function mapping, which was a surprise for me, right? I never expect cat to ask a question on that. But yes, there was a question like, set A, set B is there, and this set has 6 elements. This set B has, I guess, some 4 or 5 elements. And then, how many, okay, so the question was in language form, okay, not stating it directly. But the meaning of that statement, which he said was that, how many onto functions are there? Because the statement was something like, how many functions can be obtained by matching elements from A to B such that each of the sets in element B is matched to at least one element from set A, which means the onto function concept. So there is a formula for this, right? So in this sense, algebra, had some medium and difficult questions. There was a higher number of weightage of difficult to medium questions in algebra. Arithmetic for me, as usual, personally, I always think that all the students should be, finding more comfort with arithmetic, percentages, ratios. So yes, the questions were there: time and work, time and distance, all, and ratios. Questions were there. The time and work question was quite doable, right? It was about two people, I guess, Sita and something, and Sita is able to do the work doing for certain 8 hours, doing 5 days. Some other you know Geeta, some other name was there, able to do the same work working for 6 hours in 10 days. So so 40 hours of work of Geeta matches with the 60 hours of work of Sita. That equivalence was there. And then some condition was there that Geeta worked for, the work was done such that Geeta worked for twice the number of days, but Sita worked for twice the number of hours per day. And then we had to calculate how many days did Geeta work. So yeah, this was doable. Time and distance questions were also there. It was, yeah, time and distance question was the one in which, person goes from A to B, the other person goes from B to A, they meet each other and reach the opposite ends. And, uh, they take 1.5 hours to meet. And then after meeting, person B takes 1.25 hours more than A, more than B to reach the opposite end. So, that concept we always teach in time and distance. If you know that concept, it was quite doable. Then there was, yeah, usual questions were there on percentages and ratios, right? Income question was there about three people, you know, and them spending some amount in their rent. So yeah, arithmetic had more questions in the easy range, easy to medium range, right? While algebra had in the medium to difficult range. So you would have been should have been able to attempt most of the arithmetic question. Some of the algebra questions you should have left out. There were hardly any direct questions on number properties. Last year we saw a return of numbers direct questions after a long time. But as such, there were no direct questions on properties of numbers, like concept of factors, HCF, LCM. All that was left out. No direct questions on numbers. Um, if I try to recall, yes, so nothing on factor concept, nothing on HCF LCM concept, nothing on factorials. Yeah, there was one particular direct question. Okay, yeah, let me erase this. I remember there was one direct question, only one direct question on numbers. And surprisingly, that one direct question was on remainders. Now, I think that if you have to put one question on numbers, if I was designing the CAD paper, I would, I don't like personally putting remain the question because they are quite mechanical questions. So it was some direct question on 4 raised to power 100 divided by 7. What is the remainder? Something like that. Direct question was there. Something on this sort. Numbers might be something else. or it may be the same. If I recall, it was, I think, this only, right? So yeah, so from our basic knowledge of remainder, this was a straightforward question if you apply that Euler remainder theorem, right? So yeah, so this was only one direct question came on numbers, except that all of us know that numbers is just a topic which is an applied topic. We are dealing with numbers in every realm, whether it is we are doing algebra or arithmetic, we are doing numbers. So numbers, not a very direct weightage, but yeah, so this was one direct question, should have been done by everyone. Geometry was clearly so there were two questions if I remember, or maybe yeah, so I think there were two questions, right? One was this sphere question, another one was a very direct question on in circle question was there, right? In circle question was there. Within a rectangle, dimensions were given, you joined this and you had to form the in circle in radius in this triangle, and this is the midpoint. So this is a very easy question. This one I personally found difficult because of the calculation involved. Then there was this sphere question. Was there any other question on geometry if I can recall? There was in this one, there was this one. No, I think there were two questions. Let's see as the paper comes out, maybe if I as of now I can remember only two questions. Now coming to PNC, modern maths means sequences, PNC. I there was one question on PNC, and that was very, that was very. I found I liked that question. It was very beautifully designed question. It was about four-digit numbers formed using the digits A, B, C, D, and sum of the all possible numbers was given as something like something, it was some random thing like 33650 plus n, where n is a single digit number, and you have to find the value of a plus b plus c plus d plus n. So basically you have to decode that all the possible arrangements of abcd digits will give you those 24 numbers, right? And what will be the mathematical value of their sum? So match it with this sum. It was some number, something like this plus n. N is a single number. So you have to match it with this, and you have to find the value of a plus b plus c plus d, and also the value of n, and mark the answer choice as their sum. And this was the one, right? So yeah, so this was, I think, difficult question. In general, I would want to put this as difficult. I was able to do that because I know how to calculate this. Modern maths sequences usually had one question also on that. There was a question on AP directly. There was questions on AP which were easy. Okay, so therefore, um, I would say, all in all, you should have been able to attempt at the very least, minimum to minimum 9 to 10 is the minimum number of attempts you should have done, but that should have been with very good accuracy on ideally 11 to 14 attempts, right? Now, so to summarize, this paper, uh, with respect to the last year, was maybe scaled down to become 20 to 30% more on the easier side. That is my personal take, right? So my personal take is I like doing this paper. I found this that it was a paper meant to be able to attempted by every uh, section, or every the students from each background can attempt this paper, right? You just have to be good with your selection of the questions, right? And there were a slightly more number of questions this time that were of theta based. Type in the answer. There were more number of questions in both DILR as well as Quant, which were more number of questions, higher number of questions, which were theta based, which so that no negative marking was there. And I did, you make use of calculator a lot, even in the Quant section, even in the DILR section, right? The questions were a little bit calculation based also. There was a good mix of all the topics, right? Arithmetic also did have your normal question of SI was there also there. Nothing was left out, everything was included. Only a little bit less thing was numbers. Direct questions were very less. Only one direct question was there. Apart from that, everything was in a good mix. And as I was expecting, algebra would be difficult. That was there last year also and this year also. Right. So all the best, with your uh, effort. I hope this turns out to be good for you. Right. All our fingers are crossed. Right. So looking forward to hear back with your results. Right. So thank you. Thank you from my side. All the best.